Hello and welcome to the new episode of Spookier Times, a podcast of horror, gothic, and weird fiction across media. My name is Robert J. Gannon. You can find me there at all social media. And this is a podcast connected to the media criticism website sketchingdetails.com. We post at least 5 times a week about film, television, games, theater, music, all kinds of stuff. We have fun there. I realized so far that most of this podcast has only touched on the horror side of weird fiction. And while that is my specialty, I do know sci-fi and fantasy as well. And we're going to dip our toe into the sci-fi world with what's actually one of my favorite films of all time, and an unexpected trilogy of films, Cube. Cube came out in 1998 in the United States. It was a limited release after its run at Sundance. It is from director Vincenzo Natali, who also wrote the screenplay with Andrei Bajelic. And if you're not familiar with what I think is one of the greatest sci-fi horror films of all time, I'll give you a quick rundown of the premise. 6 strangers wake up in this bizarre cube. There's no other way to put it. It's a structure made of cubes. There are doors on the top and bottom and all 4 sides. So there's 6 doors in every room. Every room is a different color. It could be orange, could be red, could be blue, green, all that stuff. They're wearing matching uniforms that have their last name stitched on them, and no one knows who anyone else is, and no one has any idea how they wound up there. Some of the rooms are safe, and some of the rooms are trapped. If you enter a trapped room, you will die a terrible death. If you enter a safe room, you still don't know where you are. There are mathematical secrets to unlock throughout the film, and each character, presumably each character, that's put in this trap, this puzzle together, is meant to work together to solve it. This being a horror sci-fi film, you know it doesn't go down that way. This is one of the most stylized horror films. Stylized science fiction films. In the aesthetic I really like. And I think everything about it is remarkable. Are there errors in how the math winds up falling into place in the 3rd act? Yes. It's also incredibly ambitious in dealing with concepts people hadn't tried before in cinematic science fiction. Is this the genesis moment that eventually led us to so many of the modern game horrors that really were popularized by the release of Saw in the mid-2000s? I genuinely believe so. I also believe that the Venn diagram of Saw fans and Cube fans is just about a perfect circle. What is so fascinating about Cube? It's a human survival story. There's wonderful acting, there's great style, excellent special effects, and a genuine sense of tension and madness and terror. These people know they're in trouble. These people know that there is very little chance that they will escape. They lose hope quickly. It's true, they do. But they want to take that chance. They want to take that risk. They want to see if they can be the one to survive. And that pushes even bigger conflicts. There are scenes in this film that have lived rent-free in my mind for decades now. This was one of those big Sci-Fi Channel films that they got the rights to play, and they played it every weekend. And every weekend in middle school when I wasn't competing in something, or playing in a band, or doing a show, I was at home, watching Cube, studying it, trying to figure out if there was an easier solution to what they did. The solution is multifaceted, multi-layered, as this cube has what seems like an infinite amount of possibilities within it, because there's a structure of the cube comprised of smaller cubes, and the smaller cubes are constantly moving. And only one cube is going to bring you to the exit. How do you figure it out? That's all the plot of the film. Is it coordinates? Is it a formula? Is it chance? Is it random? Is it just a numbering system to let you know what rooms are safe and what aren't? How do you determine what rooms are safe? Why are we all here? Who has done this to them? These are mysteries largely left unsolved because even the stuff they figured out still doesn't help them. This is a game of chance as much as it is a game of logic, and that's what makes it so terrifying. You can do everything right and lose. You can lose because the other people trapped in this twisted game don't want you there anymore. You can lose because you made a simple mistake. You can lose because someone else makes a mistake. It's terrifying. I don't think anyone anticipated Cube would be successful enough to generate a sequel, let alone two. But it was. In 2003, Cube 2 Hypercube, the sequel, released in the United States. If I'm not mistaken, it debuted on the Sci-Fi channel, but there might have been a small theatrical release. It was really a straight-to-video affair in most countries. The director this time around is Andrei Sekula, and it was devised from a story by Sean Hood, who wrote the screenplay with a few collaborators. It is a very, very different story. And it isn't a very different story. And that's the problem. When you're trying to make a sequel for such a strange and singular film as something like Cube, you have to try and find a way to balance the need for the narrative to meet the expectations of the fans that led to the creation of a sequel, while also justifying the existence as its own new story. Hypercube, as you can imagine, just from the title alone, does some different things. The cube structure is back, the rooms largely look the same, until they don't. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some have more walls, some have less walls. Where Cube only dealt with the X, Y, and Z axis in a perfect cube comprised of cubes, Hypercube is eventually revealed to be almost a pyramid shape, which is only the tip of the iceberg of very strange issues at play. This time, 8 strangers are in the cube. And some of them do actually know each other, and they're all connected to research being done on the cube. Hypercube seems like it was a story designed to explore the why behind Cube at all. And instead, it got caught up on the need to one-up some of the shocking destruction of the original film. The idea of the cube being able to play with time and space in the sense of, like, astrophysics. Some rooms move slower in time, some rooms move faster. You can die just by walking in the wrong room, because time moves so quick you'll die instantly. There are robots that suddenly appear. There are turrets that follow them room to room. It's all very bizarre. Like, there are scenes in this film that live in my head rent-free for the wrong reason, as some of just the most laughable things I've seen in a horror or sci-fi film. There's one scene where 2 young people decide they're going to go into a remote room without checking if it's trapped or not, start having relations as one of the speed-up rooms, and they turn into skeletons while inside each other. That is pure cringe. There's nothing poetic about the way it's done, though, again, maybe a stronger hand could have made this screenplay work better. It genuinely feels like a sci-fi original movie, and it's not. And that's a problem. The other problem is the blatant ableism in Hypercube. If you're familiar with Cube, one of the characters is... They don't exactly specify what's wrong with him. The most common reading now is that he has autism. He is a man who is gifted in math, but also largely nonverbal and unable to deal with social cues, but he can solve massive math equations in his head that helps him start to unlock the puzzle of the cube. The second film decides, let's do the same thing, only let's make it a teenage girl who's blind. And let's constantly leave her in a room by herself, where she can't see what's happening, and magically is saved at the last moment from some kind of instinct that tells her what to do. What is ableist about this? This is a trope of like a magical other. She is this girl who can unlock the mystery to everything without seeing anything. So she's constantly put in danger and she's constantly exploited by her peers trying to survive this same puzzle. And to what end? Well, if you know the Cube series, you know what the end is. I don't want to give it away, but this is a film series with a very high body count, and not many people make it out. And the way they exploit the blind girl is the same way they exploit the severely nearsighted girl in the first film after her glasses break and they force her to just do math and do all their thinking for them. She is disposable to everyone else, all but one character. They try to pull that alien Ripley with Newt kind of dynamic, and it doesn't work. It's just kind of gross. And then when they finally do reveal in the end of the film and show what the cube looks like, it is laughable. And then the final moments, there's no reason for it. There's absolutely no reason for it. There is no logical reason for how this film ends. But there is one more sequel to come, and that is a turning point in the Cube story. In 2005, Cube Zero, the prequel, released in the United States. It's actually what I would have wanted in the first sequel. Writer-director Ernie Babarish takes over on this one. He does an excellent job with a very different approach to the material. We're not just trying to recreate the success of the original film. We're not increasing the number of people in the trap. We're not just adding new factors in that make even less sense than the original configuration. It is back to basics with a different perspective. The lead characters in Cube Zero are the people monitoring the cube for the designers of the program. It's the outside perspective of what is happening. It answers so many questions raised by the first film and justifies so much of what seems just slightly off in that. It also kind of apologizes for what happens in Hypercube, though this film is set many, many years before that. But it sets up the standard pressure that these people have to constantly innovate and make this prison system more destructive. In this, what is one of the first steps of the cube system, these 6 people are chosen because they are political adversaries to whoever party has created this cube. And they are, again, scientists and mathematicians and teachers and students that are getting a little too close to information they shouldn't have. And the setup is much the same as the original Cube film. The 6 strangers wake up, they meet each other, they try to figure out what's happening. The difference here is we see the human side of the oppression of the cube. One of the programmers starts to feel bad because he knows one of the people in the cube. And he wants to help her. He wants to help her so much because there is no reason for her to be punished in his mind. So he defies his directions. This is a really interesting twist that also brings the ableism discussion back into play. The first film handled that character surprisingly well. Right, like, he wasn't treated as a monster. There was a novelty to what he could do, but he was still a person able to survive, able to follow instruction, able to figure out some of what's happening in this cube. And Cube Zero provides an explanation for why that is. The ending of Cube Zero is absolutely heartbreaking and offers an alternate analysis for why that one character is the way he is. And it hits very hard for me. They're playing with the idea of PTSD, not autism. This is a man who has been so abused in his life that his mind has suffered, His speech pattern is limited. He is so terrified of interacting with other people or doing the wrong thing that he can only focus on the bare minimum to stay alive. And he has been so traumatized, he can't mask under pressure. Whew. So, with that in mind, Hypercube is the exception. And we're dealing with late 90s, early 2000s here. While it would have been great to see a disabled actor take on any of these roles in these films, it wasn't the standard then, and it's still struggling to be the standard now. It's not an excuse for it, but rather an explanation. And I think Vincenzo Natali and Ernie Babarish handle it so well, casting an abled actor rather than a disabled actor in these roles, and hit on so much that feels true and honest in directing these performances that we can kind of let that part slide. Our derived piece of media for tonight, my own work, is part of a series of videos I will eventually get back to on TikTok. I was, for the first few months of quarantine, posting an original piece of flash fiction as a word art, fully scored horror story every week on the app. These went nowhere. I wasn't as savvy to how TikTok works. I was also in trouble for supporting the Black Lives Matter movement on the platform. Keep, poking that bear on TikTok, and I keep getting punished for it. And I'd do it again. I will always fight for what's right. Anyway, I was getting a little frustrated at that point and eventually just put up a couple last stories that I had in the works as just a video of me reading it. And I'm going to let you have one of them right now. This is called Wake Up. And while it isn't inspired by Cube, it is playing with that deadly game genre. Wake up. A story. You wake up to a simple message in front of you. You have 45 seconds to get out. What do? Do you panic? Do you bang on the door hoping someone will take mercy on you? Do you reach your hand into the mess of mechanisms and gears, wires and locks sitting in front of you? Surely it's a puzzle. Or do you look around and notice the other sign in the room? One or neither, not both. They are asleep after all. Do you take the easy way out? Do you follow the sign's advice? What do you do? 15 seconds remain. Finally, I have a few recommendations for you for similar media if you're intrigued to explore more in the style and tone of Cube. First, I want to recommend a lesser-seen film from director Vincenzo Natali. This is called Haunter, and it is a horror film about being stuck in a loop. A teenager played by Abigail Breslin, one of my favorite actors, completely underrated. She's going to have a major project again, and then you're going to remember why you thought she was so amazing in Little Miss Sunshine. Not that I haven't seen that again and again and again throughout her career. It's just that she's been doing horror a lot, and that doesn't get respected. Anyway, so a teenager is stuck in this kind of time loop. And every time she goes through it, things are just a little bit different. And every time she solves something, there are consequences that change what's happening around her. It's really fascinating. It's that same kind of cyclical, what's going to happen next. It's the same, but it's different thinking behind Cube. And I think it is Natalie's next best film. And it pulls off the ending a lot better than, say, Splice. Second, and I already alluded to this with that Venn diagram comparison, if you like Cube and haven't at least tried the first Saw film, please watch it. It is a masterpiece of modern horror. It's established the style of the genre that's still sticking with us 15, 16 years later. James Wan and Lee Wannell have created some of the most iconic properties in horror, and their successors on the Saw series are doing the same thing. Saw is another deadly game, only in the original film, at most 2 people are in the same puzzle. They've been put there because they've done something that the Jigsaw killer believes they need to atone to, and they must solve deadly traps to escape. And it is very unlikely in the first film that you do escape. It has that same kind of tone as Cube. It's another low-budget kind of cult film. Even Saw 2 has the same feel. Saw 3 starts to push it. Really, if you're worried about the content, stop at 3. That's probably, at its worst, is at the same level of violence as the most disturbing deaths in the original Cube, specifically that opening sequence. And the one of the main 6 party, when he goes by himself after thinking he didn't find the trap and winds up getting destroyed. It's a fascinating series to me, and the sequels, much like the Cube sequels, were not intended and often pulled inspiration from other sources, but found ways to provide more and more of the lore that was so interesting. Finally, last but not least, I have a video game that is just wild and hilarious and bizarre, and I loved it when I played it, and it is dirt cheap and still running. It is called Half Dead, and it is clearly an unlicensed Cube video game. It's a multiplayer game where a group of players enter a maze of trapped rooms that all have the same structure but different elements to them, and many of the traps are lifted wholesale from the Cube film, or Hypercube, or Cube Zero. It is just stupid fun. That's the only way I can describe it. It's not scary, it is silly, it is over the top, but it is that kind of Cube game that people talked about for decades and someone just made it. And it is as fun as we thought it could be to try and solve these puzzles ourselves. That is going to be it for this episode of Spookier Times. Once again, I am Robert J. Gannon. You can find me there on all social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. We have the website sketchingdetails.com, which is all about media criticism. I've also relaunched my Other Robert gaming brand, which is on Twitch 5 days a week, as well as YouTube videos once or twice a day, 5 days a week. You find that all at Other Robert. And you have the Spookier Times podcast, as well as the audiobook version of Sketching Details that you can subscribe to through Transistor. And as a reminder, we are on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/Robert J. Gannon. I post daily updates there on where I publish content all over the web, video, audio, print, whatever you want to find. And you can tip us once or subscribe for as little as $1 a month to support our content across media. I also put up some sneak peeks at things I'm working on. And it's also where you can find Tick, a short musical inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, and some more projects should be joining them soon before the end of the year. That's where all of my publishing work is going to go from now on, unless a bigger deal falls through, but at this point I'm content to control my own work. Until next time, have fun, explore the world of horror, gothic, and weird fiction, and check out the Cube films. I think they're worth it.